My girlfriend wanted to move in. She was struggling with rent, and I agreed, but only if we split all the household expenses down the middle. Her reaction, she flat out refused, insisting I should cover everything. What happened next completely blindsided me. I'm Josh, 28, and I work remotely in tech. It's a stable career, and I've been lucky enough to advance quickly over the past few years. While I'm certainly not rich, I live comfortably. I don't splurge on flashy items or waste money, but I can manage my bills without any real financial strain, a privilege I truly value. I live in a 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It's not my property. My parents own it and encouraged me to live there rent-free, provided I help with its upkeep. It's their way of offering support, and I genuinely appreciate it. The house is well maintained, and I handle all the yard work, repairs, and seasonal tasks, so I don't feel like I'm freeloading. Still, I recognize how fortunate I am. For the last 2 years, I've been dating Madison. She's 26, a graduate student studying psychology, and honestly, one of the most brilliant and passionate people I've ever met. She's fiercely dedicated to her future career in trauma counseling, dedicating countless hours to reading, writing, and her field placements. Beyond her ambition, she's incredibly compassionate, the type to tear up at animal commercials and stop to help injured birds. From the moment we met through mutual friends at a dinner party, I was drawn to that unique blend of emotional depth and intensity. She's warm, witty, and possesses a remarkable ability to make you feel like the most important person in any conversation. However, like many grad students, Madison's financial situation has always been tight. She relies on a modest monthly stipend from her program, student loans, and picks up tutoring and babysitting gigs to make ends meet. Her rent used to be manageable, but a few months ago her landlord significantly increased it by $400 a month. With the added costs of her high-energy golden retriever, Clover, plus groceries, health insurance, and car maintenance, she began to feel overwhelmed. Initially, she tried to cut back, canceling subscriptions, walking instead of driving when possible, and religiously meal prepping. Eventually, though, she admitted it just wasn't sustainable. One evening over dinner, she asked if she could move in with me. To be honest, I had anticipated it. She'd hinted at her struggles, and the idea of us living together had come up playfully before. This time, however, it was serious. She laid out her entire situation: the exorbitant rent, her mounting stress, and the impossible task of finding another safe, pet-friendly place. I could see how truly exhausted she was. I told her I was open to the idea. It wasn't a hard no, but we needed clear expectations. I explained that my current roommate, Tyler, my best friend since high school, covered all utilities as his form of rent. If Madison moved in, Tyler would move out, which he was perfectly fine with. But that meant all those bills would need to be covered. That's when I stated my terms simply. If we lived together, we would split all household expenses 50-50. I wasn't talking about groceries or her personal spending. I meant the essentials: utilities, internet, property taxes, maintenance, and so on. I thought it was completely fair. Even at 50%, she'd still be paying less than her current rent, and I would actually end up paying more, since Tyler covered all those expenses in exchange for free rent. So, by agreeing to this, my own out-of-pocket costs would increase. Madison's reaction was unexpected. She didn't raise her voice, but her entire demeanor stiffened. She looked at me as if I had deeply offended her. She questioned how I could possibly expect a student, someone barely scraping by, to pay half when I earned at least 3 times what she did. She argued it wasn't fair, insisting that in relationships, expenses should be split based on income. In her view, I should cover 80% to 90% of the costs, and she'd contribute what little she could, perhaps $75 here, $50 there. She asserted that if I truly loved her, I wouldn't want her to suffer financially, especially when I had the means to ease the burden for both of us. I tried to keep the conversation calm. I told her I understood her difficult situation and that I wasn't being heartless. But this wasn't just about money. For me, it was about partnership. I explained that if we chose to share a home, we should both take ownership of that shared space and its associated responsibilities. I wasn't trying to deplete her savings or make her miserable. I simply didn't want to begin cohabitation on terms that already felt inherently imbalanced. If she moved in and only contributed a token amount while I took on everything else, it wouldn't feel right to me. I wasn't looking to be a landlord or a sponsor. I wanted an equal partner. That's when the discussion quickly spiraled downward. Madison accused me of not grasping the realities of full-time student life, claiming I was privileged and out of touch. She said I was prioritizing money over love, and that my conditions made her feel insignificant and ashamed. She told me she had trusted me to be there for her, and now she felt punished for seeking help. I reiterated that this wasn't about punishment and I didn't see her as a burden. However, if we couldn't agree on something as fundamental as financial expectations, perhaps we weren't ready to live together. That word ready seemed to deeply wound her. She looked utterly devastated. She accused me of making her feel like a failure, that she had approached me with vulnerability and need, and I had responded with cold logic and spreadsheets. She then got up, grabbed Clover's leash, and walked out. Days have passed since that night. She hasn't moved in, and Tyler hasn't moved out. I haven't seen her, though we've exchanged a few strained text messages. She says she's reconsidering everything and feels profoundly disappointed in me. She keeps implying I've let her down on some deep emotional level, that I'm not the person she believed me to be. And here I am, wondering how it all came to this. I tried to be fair. I didn't say no. I simply asked for equality in the one area that truly matters when you're about to share your life and home with someone. But it seems, to her, that was an act of betrayal. Now she's angry, distant, and speaks as if I've completely shattered her trust. After the argument, Madison barely spoke to me. The silence was deafening, stretching across days like a taut wire ready to snap. I didn't push, assuming she needed time to cool off, perhaps to reflect, or maybe to realize that my request wasn't unreasonable. I kept the house quiet, stayed to myself, and focused on my work as usual. Clover's leash, still hanging by the door, was the only real reminder that something fundamental had shifted, that someone who had envisioned a future here now viewed me as an obstacle. I gave her space, not out of guilt, but out of respect. I was hoping for a mature conversation, or at the very least, some acknowledgement that we both had valid points. Instead, one evening, while scrolling through emails after dinner, I received a Venmo notification. At first, I thought it might be a refund or Tyler splitting grocery costs. But then I saw it, a Venmo request from Madison for $200. The note attached read, "Emotional damages." I stared at my phone for a full minute, frozen. It didn't feel real. Anger, not sadness, just utter bewilderment. I clicked on it again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining things. Nope, it was real. $200, emotional damages. My girlfriend, or at that point, my almost former girlfriend, was trying to charge me as if I were a defendant in small claims court. I messaged her, not with outrage or sarcasm, just confusion. "What exactly is this about?" She responded, with a meticulously crafted paragraph-long text, as if it were designed for a public post. She claimed I had emotionally manipulated her, by initially offering a solution, cohabitation only, to cruelly snatch it away in a display of power. She alleged that I had triggered her anxiety and disrupted her financial plans by dangling the promise of stability, then withdrawing it when she was most vulnerable. She wrote that in relationships, harm should be acknowledged and compensated, and I owed her restitution for the stress I had caused. She even cited a TikTok video from a self-proclaimed relationship therapist who argued that couples should share resources based on ability, not equally, because equality was a patriarchal tool used to control women and reward selfishness. I actually laughed out loud, not cruelly, just in sheer disbelief. I declined the Venmo request, then sent her a short, polite, but direct reply. I told her this was no longer a simple disagreement about finances, but a clear sign that things were becoming toxic. I wrote, "We clearly have different ideas of what partnership means, and it's becoming impossible to see a healthy future together." Her reply was immediate and furious. She accused me of choosing money over love, of being cold, capitalistic, and emotionally abusive. My response was simple: no, I'm choosing mutual respect over entitlement. That should have been the end of it, but of course, it wasn't. The very next day, Tyler, my best friend and roommate, called me into the kitchen. He looked unusually uncomfortable, which was rare for him. Then he handed me his phone and said, "You need to see this." There, in black and white, was a string of messages from Madison. She had secretly contacted him, asking if he'd be willing to volunteer to move out of the house. But not just that, she wanted him to pretend he felt pressured to stay and to tell me he didn't want to get in the way of something real. Her words, her plan, apparently, was to guilt-trip me. She wanted to twist the narrative, making me feel selfish for prioritizing my friendship over a future with her. She aimed to corner me emotionally, to make me believe I was choosing the comfort of a roommate over the woman I supposedly loved. She was orchestrating a performance. Tyler, being the loyal friend he is, immediately shut her down and showed me everything. He didn't hesitate. He said it felt slimy, manipulative, and completely out of character for the Madison we both thought we knew. Honestly, I was stunned. I didn't say anything to her at first. I didn't know what to say. I needed time to process the betrayal. Because this wasn't just a disagreement or even a bad fight, this was something deeper, something calculated. I kept thinking about all the moments we'd shared, late nights discussing our future, cooking meals together, the way she used to bring me coffee while I worked. All of it now felt tainted, as if she had been keeping a mental tally, and when things didn't go her way, she'd dip into her bag of tricks and pull out every emotional tool she could find to tip the scales. I didn't reply to her for 2 days. I couldn't trust myself to remain calm. I knew that whatever came next would be final, and I needed to ensure I wasn't acting purely out of anger. I thought back to the Madison I first met, the one who lit up rooms and dreamed of helping people. I realized that somewhere along the way, something had changed, or perhaps she hadn't changed at all, and I just hadn't seen this side of her yet. I knew what I had to do. I began clearing space, both physically and mentally. I reassured Tyler he wasn't going anywhere, telling him I appreciated him more than ever. I blocked Madison on Venmo and muted our messages for a while. I just needed to breathe. And just when I thought things had finally reached their breaking point, just when I believed I had seen every card she had to play, then came the next surprise. Turns out the moving in drama was only the beginning. Madison and I officially broke up a few days after I confronted her about trying to manipulate Tyler. The moment I laid everything bare, the Venmo stunt, the attempted guilt-tripping, shifting blame, it became painfully clear that we weren't simply having a disagreement about bills. This was deeper. It was about control, entitlement, and expectations built on fantasy. I told her calmly, without anger, that I couldn't be in a relationship where financial boundaries were treated as betrayal, and where disagreements were weaponized into emotional warfare. She didn't cry or argue. She simply said I was cold and transactional. Then she left with Clover in tow and never looked back. At first I felt relief. Not the kind you feel after escaping a disaster, but the quieter kind, like finally setting down a heavy burden you've been carrying for too long without realizing the weight. I returned to work, spent time with Tyler, and tried to ground myself for the first time in weeks. The house felt peaceful again, no tension, no passive-aggressive silences, no emotional landmines. But that peace didn't last long. About 3 days after the breakup, the notifications started rolling in, not directly from Madison, but from friends, mutual acquaintances, classmates, even a cousin who followed her on Instagram. One of them sent me a screenshot and said I needed to see it. I opened it, expecting some vague, sad breakup quote or a picture of her dog. What I got was a multi-slide Instagram story titled, "When Love Becomes Financial Abuse." She didn't use my name, but she didn't have to. She described me as a tech bro with a free house handed to him by his rich family who pretended to be supportive until I was vulnerable, then withdrew everything to assert dominance. She painted the argument about living together not as a disagreement between partners, but as a textbook case of financial manipulation. She claimed I weaponized my privilege and refused to support the woman I claimed to love when she was in crisis. She framed my insistence on a 50-50th split as patriarchal coercion masked as fairness. And the worst part, people believed her. She posted screenshots, carefully cropped and stripped of context, snippets of our texts showing me declining her Venmo request, calling the situation toxic, a blurry image of my house from when she'd taken a selfie in the yard, now repurposed with a caption, "The palace he lives in rent-free," while asking a student to pay half. Venmo screenshots with emotional damages highlighted and my declined response front and center. It looked bad, it looked calculated. And for people who didn't know the full story, it painted me as a monster in Wi-Fi-enabled armor. The messages started pouring in. Some friends reached out to ask what was going on. Others didn't ask. They assumed I received a few texts that read like accusations. One person told me they were disappointed, but not surprised. Another said, "I didn't know you were like this," which stung more than I expected. Even Madison's sister messaged me, saying she was shocked and hurt, adding that she never thought I'd kick someone out during a financial emergency. That one hit hard, because we used to talk often, shared Spotify playlists, sent memes, back and forth, and even had plans to grab drinks next time she was in town. At first I considered just letting it blow over. Part of me thought if I stayed quiet, the drama would simply die down on its own. But the more I considered it, the more I realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was my reputation actively being rewritten in real time. So, I decided to speak. I wasn't emotional, I didn't rant. I took screenshots, full screenshots, our texts, the Venmo request, the entire conversation thread. I included the messages she had sent Tyler, asking him to fabricate pressure and guilt me into kicking him out. I wrote one post on my private Instagram story, viewable only to mutual friends. I didn't insult her or name call, I simply laid out the facts and ended it with, "This isn't about money. This is about being manipulated, gaslit, and publicly shamed for having boundaries." The response was almost immediate. Some people quietly unfollowed me, and I didn't take it personally. But most reached out privately. They apologized. They admitted they had made assumptions based on what they saw and expressed appreciation for the full context. A few people who had initially sided with her even told me they felt duped. One mutual friend mentioned that Madison had told the same story to 3 different people with 3 different timelines and things weren't adding up. The most unexpected call came from Madison's sister. She apologized sincerely. She told me she hadn't seen the full picture and had reacted emotionally, feeling embarrassed for speaking out before asking questions. I told her there were no hard feelings, but I was done explaining myself. I had stated my piece. By the end of the week, Madison deleted all the stories. Her Instagram went from public to private. She removed all posts from the last month, and, according to someone who still followed her, she stopped responding to texts altogether. A mutual friend later said she was reevaluating her communication style, whatever that meant. I truly thought that was it. I believed it was over, that we could both go our separate ways, lick our wounds, and move on with our lives. I was wrong. Here's where it gets truly bizarre. 3 weeks after everything went quiet, no more stories, no texts, no late night rants for mutuals. I thought the drama had finally burned itself out. I was wrong again. One Monday afternoon, Tyler and I returned home from errands and found 2 official-looking envelopes sitting in our mailbox. No return address, just our names and a county court stamp. We exchanged uneasy glances. Inside, summons notices. Madison had filed claims in small claims court against both of us. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some clerical error, even a joke. But no, it was real. Madison Carrington was suing me and my roommate for $2,000 in damages. The listed charges: lost housing opportunity, mental distress, and this one nearly made Tyler spit out his drink. Dog relocation trauma. Yes, dog relocation trauma. In the weeks following our breakup, while she was meticulously crafting an online narrative about being oppressed by my financial boundaries, she had apparently also been drafting a legal strategy. According to her claim, by refusing to honor a verbal housing agreement, I had forced her into emergency housing, specifically a short-term sublet that didn't allow pets. That, in her words, led to the emotional burden of rehoming her dog with a cousin in Arizona. She stated that Clover, her golden retriever, experienced stress, and that the situation compromised the therapeutic relationship between her and her emotional support animal. For this, she wanted compensation. She also claimed Tyler was complicit. In her words, his deliberate refusal to vacate the property contributed to her housing insecurity and destabilization during a vulnerable time. She presented this as a coordinated action to deprive her of shelter and cohabitation benefits. It was absurd, even laughable, but it was real. We were required to appear in court. Tyler was understandably furious. He's not the type to be dragged into someone else's mess, especially not over something he had absolutely nothing to do with. Beyond peacefully existing in the house he'd lived in for 3 years, I was less angry and more stunned. This woman who I had loved, supported, defended, and nearly appended my home for, was now attempting to weaponize the legal system against me for the crime of setting a boundary. We didn't take it lightly. We spent the next week assembling every piece of evidence: screenshots of texts, Venmo records, audio messages, calendar entries, photos, and especially the original messages she sent Tyler, asking him to lie. We even contacted Madison's cousin, the one currently caring for Clover, and asked if she'd be willing to write a statement. She agreed without hesitation. Her letter explained that Madison had asked her to take the dog temporarily while she figured things out, and that Clover was doing great daily hikes, playtime with other dogs, and 0 signs of trauma. On the day of court, we arrived early, dressed respectfully, folders in handcom, and collected. Madison showed up 15 minutes late, wearing a somber gray outfit, hair tied back, as if stepping into a courtroom drama. She carried a binder and an expression that suggested she was prepared to monologue through the apocalypse. She didn't look at us, didn't acknowledge us, just sat down across the room with the dramatic energy of someone preparing to unveil their truth to the world. When the judge entered, he wasted no time. Madison was called first, and she launched into a passionate speech about the financial, emotional, and psychological harm she'd endured. She described our relationship in bleak terms, portraying herself as a woman discarded after being promised cohabitation and support. She claimed I had manipulated her into believing she was safe, only to pull the rug out from under her when it suited me. Then she spoke about Clover, describing in detail how the dog's sense of routine and comfort was disrupted, directly linking it to my decision to impose financial ultimatums. The judge listened quietly, nodding occasionally, asking one question about dates, which she answered vaguely. Then it was our turn. I handed over our comprehensive packet. It included the original text where I said I would consider her moving in, but with a clear condition, 50/50ths, split of expenses. There was no signed lease, no formal agreement, just a proposal she had rejected. Then we presented the messages she sent Tyler, where she tried to convince him to lie about feeling pressured. We included her own Venmo request, her social media, screenshots, and a cousin's signed statement regarding Clover. The judge skimmed the pages, pausing notably at the message to Tyler. He leaned back and looked at Madison with something between disbelief and irritation. Then he uttered words I'll never forget. "Miss Carrington, you may want to reconsider weaponizing the court system over a failed relationship." He didn't even let her begin her rebuttal. Case dismissed. She stood there stunned, binder still, in hand, mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't believe she didn't get to perform her final act. Tyler and I gathered our things and walked out without looking back. Outside the building, we both exhaled at the same time, the way people do when they step back into fresh air after sitting through a thunderstorm. In that moment, everything crystallized for me. This wasn't just a messy breakup. This wasn't two people who loved each other and couldn't make it work. This was me escaping something that had the potential to rot me from the inside out. I thought we were building something real, but the second I set a boundary, she didn't respond with dialogue or compromise. She responded with shame, manipulation, public slander, and eventually, legal aggression. That's not love. That's not partnership. That's a warning sign with a neon border. Today, Tyler and I still live together. We even invested in a new espresso machine as a post-court celebration, and funnily enough, I've started dating someone new, someone who doesn't flinch at the idea of splitting dinner, someone who hears 50/50ths and genuinely believes it means both of us win.